Planet Reddit. Today's story is...
I found my husband and his lover in my bed wearing my clothes while I was pregnant. Months later, they kidnapped my newborn. My marriage to Alan ended just 4 months ago, after I found him with another woman in our house. At the time, I was pregnant and had been staying at my mother's house for a week. I decided to surprise Alan by coming home early, with the intention of making him a special breakfast before he left for work. He had been telling me how much he missed me, so I wanted to do something nice for him. However, when I got home, I found him in bed with another woman. My screams probably woke up half the neighborhood. The scene left me in shock. Alan, completely upset, began to apologize and try to explain himself. But instead of accepting his responsibility, he tried to turn the situation around, suggesting that I was to blame for not calling before arriving and showing up so early. As if I were responsible for having discovered him. I felt devastated and furious. I demanded to know who the woman was, but Alan constantly evaded the question. He insisted that it wasn't important and that we could discuss it later. But for me, there was no later. The woman maintained a cold attitude, showing no remorse. Her expression made it clear that it wasn't the first time she had been in my house. She was indifferent to the whole situation. When I asked her directly if she was having an affair with my husband, she nodded without hesitation, admitting everything without a shred of shame. Alan shouted at her not to listen to him, insisting that he would explain everything later. The woman laughed at him and started to get dressed. It was then that I noticed something that made my stomach churn. She was wearing my red nightgown. I was paralyzed. How dare she wear my clothes after being with my husband? With a voice trembling with anger and disbelief, I demanded that she take off my nightgown. I asked her what she thought she was doing wearing my clothes after being with my husband. The situation made me angrier and angrier. She replied with total indifference that she had nothing to wear for the night, so she had simply gone to my wardrobe and taken what she wanted. Then, with an unpleasant smile, she added, "It's not as if you could wear it now," as she pointed to my pregnancy. At that moment, I lost control. Who did this woman think she was, coming into my house, being with my husband and daring to wear my clothes? Without thinking, I pounced on her and grabbed her hair with all my strength. She screamed in pain trying to get free, but I was taller and stronger. If she hadn't been pregnant, I would have thrown her to the ground, but I didn't want to risk my baby. She continued struggling until Alan intervened and pulled her away from me. Then, with a defiant look on her face, she shouted to Alan that she would make me pay for touching her hair and demanded that he defend her if he wanted to see her again. Her tone was authoritarian. She spoke to Alan as if he were her partner, as if she had the right to give him orders. That's when I realized it wasn't a casual encounter. It was clear that they knew each other well. She was talking to him as if she were his girlfriend. Surprisingly, Alan took her side. He started to scold me for having attacked her, telling me that I needed to calm down and be more rational. I couldn't believe it. He, who had betrayed me, was trying to make me feel guilty for defending myself. I demanded that he tell me exactly who she was and what was going on between them. Then Alan began to explain that since I had become pregnant, he had lost his attraction to me. He told me that while his feelings for me were fading, he had met Lila, the woman he had met him, and that she satisfied him in ways that I never could. His words left me devastated. All those months, all the love I thought we shared, no longer meant anything to him. He went on to say that what had started out as casual encounters with Lila had turned into something serious. He told me quite matter-of-factly that he had planned to talk to me about this, but as she was pregnant, he wanted to wait until after the birth. According to him, he wanted to spare me suffering, as if that were a favor. He had already decided to leave me. The betrayal was unbearable. While I was carrying his child in my womb, he was having fun with another woman. During our 4 years of marriage, I had supported him in everything: his career, his dreams, his struggles, and for what? So that he could betray me like this. The anger and pain I felt were overwhelming. It was as if all the love I had given, all my sacrifices, meant nothing to him. I told Alan that there was no reason to wait until after the birth of the baby to get a divorce. If he was so sure that he didn't love me anymore, what was the point of staying married? Why prolong the situation? I didn't care about his excuses anymore. Alan tried to argue that we could talk about it later, but I didn't want to listen anymore. The pain of his betrayal was too much, and my frustration exploded. I told him clearly to pack his things and get out of my house, and to take his mistress with him. The nerve of bringing that woman into my house, into my own bed, was something I could not tolerate. Even if she no longer felt attracted to me, how could she dare to disrespect me like that? Alan was visibly surprised. He never expected me to take such a firm stand, and he tried to argue, but I wasn't going to give in. I warned him that if he didn't leave, I would call the police. I wasn't going to allow him to stay in my house for another minute. Finally, my ex-husband reluctantly agreed and started to gather his things. As they were leaving, Lila had the audacity to address me. She sneered that everything Alan had told her about me over the months was true, that I was a cold and calculating woman. She added cruelly that that was why no man could ever be with me. His words hurt me deeply, as if he were rubbing salt into a wound that I thought could not hurt anymore. To make matters worse, Alan said nothing to defend me. They left without a single word of apology or regret. As soon as the door closed behind them, I collapsed. The weight of betrayal, pain, and loss overwhelmed me. I couldn't hold back the tears any longer. I cried like never before, but in the midst of that pain, a part of me knew that I couldn't let them destroy me. After all, I had been raised by a single mother who taught me to be strong and to stand up for myself no matter what the circumstances. So, despite feeling devastated, I got up. I wasn't going to let Alan or anyone else take away my dignity. In the weeks that followed, I contacted a lawyer, sought advice, and filed for divorce. Fortunately, I had been cautious enough to get Alan to sign a prenuptial agreement before we got married, which meant that our divorce proceedings would be quicker and easier. As I was in a better financial position than him, I knew it wouldn't be a protracted battle. The only thing left to resolve was the custody of our child. As a mother, I obtained primary custody of the newborn. I would raise my son and Alan would have supervised visits, at least until our son was older, at which point we could reconsider the custody arrangements. I couldn't trust him to be alone with the baby after everything that had happened, and the lawyer made it clear that it was in the best interests of the child, especially given the circumstances. In the end, we both agreed on this. 4 days ago, I gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. The experience was overwhelming, but I had my mother with me the whole time. It was a great comfort to have her there. As I needed all the support I could get during the birth, I was still in the hospital recovering when Alan came to visit me and our baby the following day. Surprisingly, he seemed genuinely proud of being a father, despite all the anger I felt towards him. He wanted us to at least try to be good parents together for the sake of our child. Our child was the only important thing now. After a while, my mother decided to go home to freshen up. She had been up with me for what seemed like hours, and you could tell she needed to rest. I was exhausted too, both physically and emotionally, and I really wanted to get some sleep. Alan assured me that he would stay in the room and look after our son while I rested. I asked him to wake me if the baby cried, as I would probably need to feed him, and Alan promised he would. Imagine my panic when I woke up 3 hours later to my mother frantically asking, "Where's your baby?" I was disoriented and confused as I tried to gather my thoughts. We searched the entire hospital room, but neither my baby nor Alan were anywhere to be seen. My heart began to race. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins as I realized that something was very wrong. I immediately asked the nurses if they had seen Alan or my son, and one of them told me, to my horror, that she had seen Alan leaving the hospital with my baby. Hearing those words, I was paralyzed with disbelief. Alan had no right to take my son without my permission, especially after promising me that he would stay and take care of him. My mind was racing and I could hardly process what was happening. I grabbed the phone and started calling him frantically, but he didn't answer. Each unanswered call increased my anxiety. My heart was pounding in my chest and I was on the verge of a panic attack. Where had Alan taken my son? What if my son woke up hungry? What would he eat? Was Alan planning to disappear with him? Take my baby away from me? All sorts of distressing questions flooded my mind, each one more terrifying than the last. All I could think about was my baby and whether he was okay. After multiple missed calls, Alan finally answered, or so I thought, but to my surprise, it wasn't Alan's voice on the other end. It was Lila. She calmly informed me that my baby was with her and that Alan had taken him to her house to show her a newborn, since I hadn't allowed her to visit me in the hospital. This was true. Alan had asked me if he could bring Lila with him and I had refused because I didn't want to see her. I asked her to tell me how my son was and to pass the phone to Alan so I could complain to him for having left with my son without permission. Then Lila told me that my son had woken up shortly after Alan had taken him there and that he was crying, clearly hungry. So Alan had run to a shop to buy formula so he could feed him. Then she added that Alan had left his phone behind by mistake, so I would have to wait if I wanted to talk to him. I was completely baffled. My son had woken up hungry, crying, and she wanted me to wait. Besides, what right did they have to give my son formula when I, as his mother, had not given my consent? I immediately demanded that they return to the hospital and give me my son back so that I could feed him. But Lila insisted that she and Alan knew what they were doing, saying that they would now be my son's parents together with me and that they also knew what was best for him. She told me to stop worrying and that after feeding him, Alan would give the baby back to me. Her tone was so cold and dismissive that she sounded like a deranged person trying to justify keeping my hungry newborn son away from me. I continued to demand that they return my son to me, but she kept saying that she and Alan had read books on parenting. That they were prepared to take care of my son without me. Her words only increased my fury. At that moment, I knew I had to act fast. Without hesitation, I ended the call with Lila and immediately called the police. I explained to them that my ex-husband had kidnapped my newborn son and left him with a stranger. My heart was racing as I told them how terrified I was for my baby's safety, especially since I had just given birth a day ago. The fear that something could happen to him, that he could be hurt or scared without me, consumed me. I needed to make sure he was returned to me safe and sound. The police acted quickly and in less than an hour, they arrested Alan and Lila for kidnapping and endangering my son. Soon after, they brought my son back to the hospital. I rushed to change him and feed him, and although he seemed to be physically fine, I noticed that he had been crying for hours. His little face was red and seeing him like that broke my heart. The whole situation was a nightmare, but at least I was glad that my baby was back where he should be, with me. Since then, my ex and Lila have been released on bail, but they are facing charges and we will have to go to court soon. I made it clear that I was not going to drop the charges and that I wanted them to pay for what they did. This was not something I could ignore. My baby's safety was at stake and they needed to answer for their actions. At first, Alan insisted that he had done nothing wrong and that I was overreacting, that I shouldn't have called the police. He tried to defend himself by saying that he just wanted to show off to our son, but it was obvious that he didn't understand how serious the situation was. He thought he could do whatever he wanted without facing the consequences. However, I guess after talking to a lawyer, Alan changed his attitude. Now he's asking me to reconsider the charges, saying he's facing jail time and begging me to forgive him. So, Reddit, am I the bad guy? Update 1. To everyone asking why Alan and Lila would do such a thing, I am as surprised as you are. When we divorced, I thought we could at least be good parents together for the sake of our son. But what Alan has done goes beyond any limit. It is unforgivable. He had no right to take my baby and leave, especially when he didn't even have primary custody. That he took my son without telling me or thinking about how it would affect me or the baby shows that he has no respect for me as a mother. Besides, it's not just about custody, it's about having common sense and responsibility as a parent. He can't make decisions like that without consulting me, especially when it's about our newborn son who is barely a day old. I have seen some comments asking why I called the police and, honestly, it makes me think that some of you don't understand what it means to be a parent, especially a mother. Any parent who has a child, especially a newborn, knows that you can't separate a baby from its mother right after birth. Newborns need constant attention. They need to be fed, changed and cared for. It's not just a matter of a few hours, they need care all day, every day. When my son came back to me, he was crying. His diaper hadn't been changed and he was hungry. It broke my heart to see him like that. Nobody, especially Alan and Lila, had the right to put my baby in that situation. As a mother, I had to do what was necessary to protect my child and make sure he was safe. Calling the police was the only way to guarantee that he would be returned to me immediately. How could my ex and Lila decide on their own to buy and give formula to my newborn without even consulting me? That decision was not theirs to make, especially since I was the mother. It's totally outrageous. And more importantly, how could my ex leave my baby with someone I don't even know well? Someone I only know because I found her in bed with him. What if something had happened to my baby while she was with her? What if she had hurt him? How could he be so irresponsible, so careless? Just thinking about it terrifies me. I don't regret for a second calling the police. What they did was wrong and I'm not going to let it go. I'm so grateful that my baby is back with me and that he is well, but I will make sure that Alan and Lila answer for what they did. My priority is my son and I will do whatever it takes to protect him always, even if that means making difficult decisions. Update 2. It's been a week since my last update. I'm relieved to say that my baby and I are both fine now. We're back home and my mother is staying with us to help out. I've also installed cameras everywhere as a precaution. I'm not going to risk my son's safety after everything that's happened. As for my ex, he's been begging me for mercy, trying to get me to reconsider the charges. Apparently he is scared of going to prison, but I have been ignoring him. So the other day, he tried to come to my house and force me to talk to him. When he suddenly appeared, looking upset and desperate, I didn't let him in. Instead, I went out onto the porch and closed the door behind me. My son was asleep inside and I wasn't going to let this man wake him up. Alan basically told me that, as my son's father, I had every right to take our son wherever I wanted, that I should stop acting like the resentful ex-wife and that I should just forget about the whole thing. He wanted me to drop the charges immediately and try to explain to the police that it had all been a misunderstanding. His nerve was truly unbelievable. I told her that she wasn't going to do any of that when it wasn't true. Then, without caring about anything I had been through, everything we had been through, she told me that apparently this was the reason why she had stopped loving me. She looked me straight in the eye and said with an arrogant tone, "This whole situation, the way you have acted, is exactly why I couldn't be with you anymore. You are so controlling, so inflexible, that's why I cheated on you. It's impossible to deal with you. It's no surprise that things fell apart between us. You destroy everything you touch." I was shocked by the way he spoke. Before I could react, he continued shouting at me, "Do you really think you're the only mother here? This is my son too, and I deserve your respect. You had no right to call the police and have me arrested." To him, the whole situation seemed to be my fault. I was the one who had pushed him to cheat. I was the one who had made him stop loving me. I was the one who had made him feel trapped. He seemed completely oblivious to how serious what he had done was and seemed to think that just because he was the father, he could do whatever he wanted without consequences. I took a deep breath, holding my ground as I looked him straight in the eye and told him that his manipulation was no longer going to work on me. I was no longer a naive woman he could walk all over as before. You have no right to stand there and tell me why you stopped loving me. You cheated, you lied, and you are the one who destroyed everything. I'm glad we got divorced and I don't care about you anymore. But this isn't about us, it's about my son. You took him to see your girlfriend just a day after he was born, while I was still recovering in hospital. You and I both know you had no right to do that. Now you think I'm supposed to forget about it? I don't care if you're afraid of going to jail because I'm not going to drop the charges. His jaw tightened and I could see he was trying to find something to say, but I interrupted him. You can't play the victim card anymore, Alan. You made your choices and now you're facing the consequences. Do you think you deserve sympathy just because you share DNA with my son? Let me tell you that being a parent is about actions, not biology, and your actions have only demonstrated how inadequate and immature you are to make any decisions for him. I will make sure the court punishes you for this. Then I closed the door in his face while he continued to shout from outside. He crossed the line and I'm not going to back down. As for Lila, she has continued to send me the most horrible and disturbing messages since that day. It's as if she set out to harass me at every turn. Every time I think she can't sink any lower, she surprises me. That woman's nerve knows no bounds. She wrote to me saying that she hoped to become my son's new mom, but that I ruined her chance out of pure jealousy because I had her arrested. Then she told me that she wished my son and I would die in a car accident and that we didn't deserve to live. I was speechless when I read that message. It was beyond disgusting. What kind of person wishes death on someone, especially a mother and her child? This is completely cruel and disrespectful. I have shown all of Lila's horrible messages to my lawyer and we are taking immediate action. We plan to get a restraining order against Lila as soon as possible. Given how threatening and malicious her messages have been, we believe it is necessary to make sure she stays away from me and my baby forever. Update 3: A month and a half has passed since my last update. Yesterday was finally the day of the court hearing. Alan and Lila brought their lawyers, of course, trying to make it seem that what happened wasn't so serious and avoiding all responsibility. Alan's defense was full of excuses. He tried to say that he was just trying to be a good father by taking the baby to Lila while I was sleeping, and that he planned to return the baby to me later that day. He said it was actually my fault for not letting Lila come with him to see our son. According to him, he never meant to cause harm and said that I got scared because of my hormones and called the police for no reason. But no matter what he said, the facts were clear. He had taken my baby without permission, he had left him with a woman he barely knew, and he had completely ignored my rights as a mother. There was no justification for what he had done. He asked the judge to be understanding. Lila, as expected, did not accept her responsibility either. She tried to act as if she had the right to meddle in my son's life, as if she were some kind of stepmother. She said that I resented her for winning my husband and that I just wanted to make her life difficult. At that moment, my lawyer stood up and began to read out loud all of Lila's messages, full of malice and threats. It was important that the judge understood what kind of person my ex's girlfriend really was and why she needed to stay away from me and the baby. I saw how surprised people were as they listened. It was obvious that Lila had no respect for me, for my son, or for our boundaries. After presenting everything, the messages, how things happened, the police reports and my testimony, the judge was clear in his decision. Alan was found guilty of kidnapping and child endangerment. Lila was also accused of helping to endanger the child. In the end, Alan received a year of probation and has to take compulsory parenting classes. If he breaks the rules of his probation, he will go to prison. Lila was given a restraining order and ordered to stay away from me and my family. The order means I no longer have to worry about Lila sending me any more hate messages, and the judge's decision made it clear that I, as a mother, have the final say in how my son is brought up. They also both have to pay for the emotional damage they caused me and the baby. I saw how enraged Alan and Lila were at the end of the trial. But there was nothing they could do about it now. They got what they deserved. Update 4: 6 months have passed since the trial and life is starting to feel normal again. My son, who I can't believe is already 6 months old, has brought so much joy into my life. Every step he takes, his first smile, the first time he rolled over, and now that he can almost sit up by himself, makes it all worthwhile. I have concentrated on providing him with a stable and loving environment, surrounded by family and friends who really care about him. My mother visits us whenever she can, and I am very grateful for her support. She has helped me a lot, from looking after my son at night to supporting me when I needed it most. I really don't know what I would have done without her. As for Alan and Lila, they have both been completely out of our lives. Alan tried to contact me once or twice, but I didn't reply. I'm done with him. I've made it clear that my son and I are moving on without him. And that's exactly what we're doing. As for Lila, the restraining orders have worked and I haven't had any contact with her since the trial. To be honest, there are still times when I think about everything that happened with Alan and Lila and feel anger and pain again, but I try not to let those feelings get the better of me. What matters now is my son and the life we are building together.